Chris, Infinite Realities, and I am talking today to one of my heroes. Since we started these, the person probably I'm most excited to talk to, Karen Berger. Iconic is too soft of a word. Thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, iconic is too soft of a word. Your contribution is amazing. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm just listening here, enjoying you gushing. No, but that's
no, I'll gush for
no, I'm very, very happy to be here, and so happy that you're doing this. It's it's a great thing, to be doing for comics fans, comics creators, other retailers, anyone who just happens to be passing by on on Facebook or YouTube or wherever. So it's good.
Well, how have you been doing through all this weirdness?
Well, I think it's what it is. Every day is different, and every day is the same. So it's that kind of strange balance of sort of Groundhog's Day and trying to get past that. So some days are challenging and some days are fine. Some days are like, hey man, this is kind of cool. No real obligations. I don't have to have pressure. Do I have to go to the gym? No, I have pressure. Do I work out of my house? I mean, you play, I think, many of us, especially myself, I have to put some pressure on myself to do things, So some outside pressures are gone, which is good. But I replace them with other pressures. It helps me be motivated. But
yeah, good. I think we're all struggling with that, right? You're just trading out old pressures for new.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the human condition or something, or neuroses, more like it. I'll speak for myself. So
anyway. Well, how's comics going for you? And how's everything at Dark Horse weathering right now for you?
Yeah, well, I think we're holding our own. I mean, we're going to be releasing books on a staggered basis when the market opens up again. Like the other publishers. And we don't want to obviously flood the stores with a lot of comics and books all at once, and working on the best strategy to do that, which is sort of ongoing and evolving all the time. But everybody's very supportive, and we're all in this together, and still talking to people about their comics and about doing new stuff. So it's hard to predict when certain new things will happen. Now, obviously, we need to see how the market comes back, when it comes back. Again, don't want to flood the market with a lot of new things, but still want to be able to supply that as well, too. So a lot of it is trying to keep enough balls in the air so we'll have to have cool stuff coming down the pike, but not to get too far ahead of ourselves either, because again, we have to see how the market will respond as well. So,
well, I wanted to ask you about that because you've been in comics
many years
since '81, right? I think that's when you started working with DC. Was 1981.
Yeah, well, that's my first published work. Was 81.
Gotcha. So you've been in comics for a little while, and you've seen the ebbs and flows. One question that we keep getting asked as retailers is, will comics survive this? I feel like I would like to get your take on that. I personally feel comics will survive. How do you think they will? Do you think they will? How will things be different?
I think comics will survive. I mean, I do think that we have never faced anything like this in our lifetimes, even our collective lifetimes. The other downturns that have been that have historically happened and affected comics, and the economy. Nothing has been like this, I think, as we all know. Mm-hmm. But I think, to our favor as a creative form of storytelling, dedication and passion of our readers, and retailers and publishers, and obviously, and the people, most important, the people who actually create comics. I mean, I think all those things combined will keep the medium, thriving, but who knows how it will, again, there will be an effect. I think there will be an economic effect on some level, because when you have so many people losing jobs, how is that going to affect what their discretionary income will be? I mean,
Right.
Again, you hope that people will still keep their, comics kitty, for extra pennies. And thankfully, we're still relatively inexpensive. We're not like video games, but it does add up. So I think comics will definitely survive, but I think there's going to be an effect. Honestly, before all this happened, I think the market was oversaturated anyway. Too much material. Too many variant covers and just a lot of stuff being thrown into stores. And I think a lot of competition, especially in the direct market, to get noticed. And so I think, maybe this will, separate the wheat from the chaff, and the creatively strong, will survive, be Darwinian about it. Who knows? But I think comics will definitely stay around for sure.
Well, let's talk about your career. It is a who's who and what's what of the books that you've edited. If you're watching this and you have even a passing knowledge, basically think of most of your influential writers these past 30 years, and they feed back.
Excuse me, I'm not doing this during an interview, but I'm drinking my tea. So okay, yeah.
So I want to talk about, so one of the things that you did pre-Vertigo and the launch of Vertigo is you perpetually pushed boundaries. You weren't someone that maintained the status quo of comics. Where did that need to push the boundaries come from?
Well, I wasn't a comics fan when I entered the business. So I didn't really have any preconceived notions of really kind of what made a good comic, what a good comic should be. I had no attachment to any characters or any continuity. The only comics I really read as a kid was like Archie's and Mad magazines. I have older brothers, so I read more Mad than anything, probably. Romance comics. But I, never read DC or Marvel stuff. So when I got into comics, I was kind of like, well, this is really cool. I mean, I love this way of storytelling. I love the collaborative aspect of creating comics. And I love the fact that you can tell any kind of story in comics. And that was something that actually Jeanette Kahn told me when the first time I met her. Jeanette Kahn, who was really the legendary publisher and president of DC Comics for many years, and the person who gets more credit than she gets more credit, I think, that should get more credit, frankly, than anybody in terms of how this medium has transformed, because she made it possible at the very beginning in terms of engendering an atmosphere with creators and with editors at a time when all we were doing were publishing company-owned superhero comics. But she was like, hey, man, you can do anything. You should go out there and push the boundaries, tell any kind of story. And that was something that always stuck with me. And because I didn't have a comic book background, because I was a woman, because the majority of stuff that was being created in comics when I came in didn't really appeal to women, I was like, well, how can I make this interesting for me and potentially other people? And I've always said, very selfishly, that I've always edited comics that I've wanted to read myself. and I've always sort of kept that as my guiding light. Do I really want to read this? I'm not just doing it because I have to.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, and for me, it was all about what can we do to take this wonderful storytelling medium and get it beyond, male superhero power fantasies, and how can we do what Europeans do, what the Japanese do in terms of great comic storytelling, and get beyond the formula and get beyond the company characters, and how can we expand that and take this into other genres and give it more of a literary feel, and to be experimental, and because it's an amazing hybrid, unique form, and let's why hold ourselves back? So that's always been my sort of guiding principle.
Well, I think that I know for a fact. I mean, history shows. I mean, you get creators like Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison, like long list of creators that when you make lists of most influential works, they were done under your watch. So it definitely paid off.
I think so. I think so. But hey, man, if it wasn't for them, none of this would have happened. So, and Alan was especially, very well established in England before I started working with him. And Len Wein brought him over to write Swamp Thing, and Len edited Watchmen. But I started editing Swamp Thing very early on in Alan's run. I think with his issue 25, I believe, was my first, and his I think was 20. So yeah, no, it was, yeah, I was so lucky to have worked with Alan. I mean, changed my life, totally changed my life.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. This is something that when we had your former protege, Shelley Bond, on, we asked her the same, and we'll ask you. So what is your job as an editor as you see it? Whether you're working with an Alan Moore or up and coming, what is your role? What do you see your job as?
Well, ultimately it's all about the story at the end of the day. So and helping the writer and the artist get to that story, to get to the best story possible, out of their creative force. Part of that is recognizing what you think is a good story, because as an editor, you are being paid for your taste and you are being paid for your judgment, and it's still a business at the end of the day. It's like, does this just appeal to me, or do I feel like it can also appeal to a wider audience? So you have to take all those things into consideration as well. And so to me, you edit each person differently. Someone like Alan Moore, you're just like, oh, thank you, Alan, this is wonderful. I love you, write me more. You don't do anything. But with other writers, it's a give and take depending on who the person is. If it's a newer writer, and I'm very involved in the developmental side, and I really enjoy that. Working with new writers and working with writers from other fields, novelists or TV writers or screenwriters who come to comics and, want to take a stab at doing what we do here. So I love working through the process of writing comics with talented writers from other fields, as well as working with emerging comics writers too. So part of my job as an editor is just really making sure that the story and the concept, the characters, the overarching arc. It depends, obviously, if it's a monthly series or a graphic novel. But at the end of the day, you're like a producer. You are a producer. A comic book editor, I think, is the only person in the field of editing where you actually are involved in every task. The comics editor is involved in the script and in the art and in the lettering and the coloring and getting the cover done and writing ad copy, it's producing the whole package. So an editor is, it's a very obviously creative function, but there's all a whole organizational, again, production aspect to it. So it's a big job. It's a lot involved. It's great.
Have you ever, and I feel like I know, man, has there been a time where, or have there been times where you've had to go to bat with the publisher over projects that you've believed in that were maybe scary for them?
Oh, at DC?
Any publisher where you had to dig your heels in and say, no, I believe in this project?
Oh, well, all the time, all the time. But, but I will say that to Dick Giordano's credit and Paul Levitz's credit and Jeanette's, is that they gave me a lot of freedom. God gave me a lot of rope to either hang myself or to swing out, into, over the trees. And so it wasn't an ongoing, I don't want to make it sound like it was an ongoing battle. It wasn't in any stretch of imagination. But there were definitely some projects, particularly with Paul, where I would, have to argue a point. And he was creatively very generous, I will say. And because I think he recognized, the strong creative thinking behind the work that I was pitching, and Paul has enormous respect for creators and what they're trying to say. He's a writer himself, and he recognized also that if you're gonna give someone a job where creatively they're there to push boundaries, if that's really what their mandate is, and that was ultimately what my mandate was with the Vertigo, is he let me do it. And Paul was very brave in letting me take some of the creative chances that I did. So
what's really cool about your books and Vertigo and the work you've been doing at Dark Horse, it seems that in addition to be, not your standard company fare, they all seem to be 201 gateway comics that really draw people in who weren't attracted to comics because they just associated them with superheroes and what have you. And you said earlier that was by design. Do you think comics are doing a good enough job making more of those, or do you think comics could do a better job at making more gateway comics?
Oh, I think we've come a long way in the past, 10, 15 years in doing that. I mean, I think comics are in a very good place in opening up the doors to other people who are not necessarily familiar with the form, but to have material that's, interesting, between the, a lot of stuff that's done at Image, a lot of stuff at other, smaller creator-owned companies. There's a lot of really great stuff out there, but there's also a lot of navel-gazing stuff out there too. And I think that's the other thing too, when I said before that I think that the market is oversaturated. It's oversaturated on superhero stuff and company stuff. It's also oversaturated on independent stuff too, this is just me talking, but I do feel that there's a lot of stuff out there that is not bringing in new people. It's navel-gazing stuff, but that's just my opinion. Some people might really enjoy it. I mean, we all have, equal, comics are the great equalizer. Is that I don't know if that's the right expression, but what's great about comics is that you can enter it really easily as a creative person. It doesn't cost a lot of money. People want to work in comics so badly that they'll work for free to get their stuff published. And that's how a lot of stuff is published these days. And you get some really good stuff out of that. And you don't get a lot of really good stuff out of that too. But that happens in all fields. It's not just comics. It happens in all fields.
Was there anything in comics that got you excited right now? Any line of comics? Any one comic in particular?
Um,
Or is there any trend in comics that has you excited right now?
I'm thinking, I'm busy reading novels now, to be honest. I'm not a big comics reader. I'm really not, I'm really not. I mean, I love Jeff Lemire's stuff, so so I'll read, and he does like, pretty much a new comic like every month it seems for some publisher, and I know he and Matt Kent just kickstarted something now, which is great, and I don't read a lot of comics. I really don't. I'll read something if I hear it's really good. There are certain writers, I'll read Kelly Sue DeConnick stuff. I think she's really talented. Um, I, but honestly, I don't have a long list right now of comics. I'm busy reading novels now, spending a lot of time. Yeah.
Well, looking back at Vertigo and everything that came out of it, and then moving towards, Berger Books, I mean, what is it like being a trendsetter at that level? When you look back at that,
I don't think of it like that, I mean, it's nice, and I'm flattered that you're saying that, and maybe objectively, if I stepped outside my body, I'd say, okay, yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, I recognize what I've accomplished, and I'm very proud of it and honored to have worked with the people who've made that happen, who've helped make that happen. But, to me, it's just like, hey, man, I'm just having a good time. I was really lucky to kind of fall into this medium and to, work with a lot of really interesting people and to be in environments, where at DC, where I could really take chances and do different things and get, company support. And with Berger Books at Dark Horse, it's a similar thing. Mike Richardson is incredibly supportive of whatever I'm doing. I haven't had any conflict there. It's a great gig. I'm keeping the line very small at Berger Books because one of the reasons why I wanted to come back into comics after I left was I missed it. I missed hands-on editing, and I had gotten away from hands-on editing at Vertigo because the line got so big and I had a big staff and a lot of stuff to oversee. So I really missed, getting in there. So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm having a great time.
you're still enjoying comics.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I got a couple of people sent messages before the interview, and it seemed like 201. A lot of people just want to know a little bit about Sandman. That is a lot of favorite comic series ever. Is there, from an editorial perspective, what was that like during that time watching Sandman become the phenomenon that it did?
It was very organic. It was very organic. So it was, you're working on this book, and here Neil is a new writer and the artists were new. And, it was, when you're working on something that, when you can look back in hindsight and say, hey man, what was it like? It was like, you're just working on something you think is really cool, but it's, again, it's just part of, what you do as an editor. So it was, it was great creative experience and a great personal experience, working with Neil. And, but, I think when we realized that Sandman really sort of broke out from the pack was, and I say that more in terms of reaching outside the comics medium, that was really a thrilling thing. But it was all a gradual thing. It wasn't like, hey, today you have the Sandman movie. It's not like you can point to necessarily one book that did that. It was the whole body of work. So again, it's the whole, compound, I guess.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, whatever. Compound compendium or whatever. Yeah. So, but it was a great time, and then also how certain things sort of came to be, which weren't planned. Like, we didn't plan to have different artists on different storylines, but we just wound up doing that because that's just how it ended up working with the different artist schedules. So again, how certain things happen, which seemed like you planned it that way and you really didn't at the very beginning. So those kind of things are cool when you look back at that. But the time was like, how the hell am I going to get this book out on a monthly basis? So
at the time, it's a job.
Exactly. Yeah. But a fun job. Yeah.
Speaking of jobs, can you tell folks a little bit what you got going on now?
Well, I have some visual aids I brought just very much for this. Yeah. Everything. Can you see this? Yeah. Yeah. Everything is out. The first volume is out. Well, I'm not exactly sure when it's supposed to have come out last week in the direct market. So still waiting to find out the definite date that it will be released from Diamond. But it will be actually available in the bookstore chain. Because that is a different supply, but people should go to their local comic book stores to get this and order this from their local comic book store. So we're doing this is a 2-book set, and the second arc is coming out later in this year. And this is, again, people who haven't read it, it's Chris Cantwell and Ian Colbert. And Chris did the really phenomenal series She Could Fly that I published last year. We did two storylines on that, and Chris is also a TV writer, co-creator of *Halt and Catch Fire*. Amazing AMC show. So this is a really phenomenal book. Everything, and then Ruby Falls. By Anna Sente and Flavio Biondi will be out in comic book stores, I believe, in June. Again, this got held up because of in China we have our collections printed in China. So this was, I think everything was actually on the boat at some point. We push these things up, ahead of time with a lot of advance, whatever. Notice, but anyway, so Ruby Falls. This is a great murder mystery that involves women from 3 different generations in a small sleepy town, and this is coming out in June sometime. And Invisible Kingdom, the second volume by Willow Wilson and Christian Ward, I'm spacing out here, will be out also towards the end of June. And we also have another storyline, Invisible Kingdom, coming out later in the year as well too. So these are the 3 most recent books that are coming out, and then some stuff later on, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet.
Well, when you are ready to talk about it, I hope that this was not a painful experience, and maybe we can talk about it again when that
Absolutely. I would love to.
Karen, we cannot thank you enough for this. Like I said, everybody here at the shop, huge fans. Your work's had such an impact on us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everything that you guys do. I mean, if it wasn't for the direct market retailers, and I know you're new to this, so you can only take a little credit for it. But the direct market retailers, you're the ones who are out there in the front lines, hand selling, our work and the creators' work, and that's. Without the direct market, comics wouldn't be where they are today. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Berger.